Here's live. My name is Sergio Tigera, and we come to you each and every week with people who have been game changers in their field. And you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite platforms, as well as YouTube. So make sure to subscribe and like and comment on your thoughts about the episode. So today, my guest today is Setti Coscarella. Hey, Setti, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sergio. Thanks for having me.
So building upon more than 2 decades of experience in investment banking, private equity, entrepreneurship, and strategic leadership for one of the world's largest tobacco companies, Setti is the Chief Executive Officer of TAAT Global, spearheading its entry into the $814 billion global tobacco industry. Setti created a business unit within the Canadian division of Philip Morris International dedicated to the commercialization of reduced risk products, RRP. It's an emerging category to offer alternatives to tobacco cigarettes. And in August 2020, Setti joined TAAT in the following quarter, brought its tobacco-free and nicotine-free alternative to cigarettes to tobacco wholesalers and retailers in Ohio, where it's currently sold statewide. At the beginning of his career, Setti held an analyst and investment banking roles at 3 of Canada's big 5 financial institutions, as well as positions in private equity and management consulting. He also co-founded the Gentleman's Expo, an annual consumer show in Toronto that attracted more than 25,000 attendees each year. So, Setti, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. That's quite the intro.
Yeah. Well, you got quite the resume, man. And so TAAT Global, if you guys have not heard of it, it is doing some really amazing things. And that's why we have them here on the show on Gamechangers, because they are changing the game in the tobacco industry. But before we get into that, Setti, give me a little background. I know you're a family man. You got 2 kids just like me. So you are sleeping through the night like we just talked about. Give me a little bit of your background. How did you, you have a degree in math, as I understand it, right? How did you get into the tobacco industry? And give me a little bit of your background.
Oh man, it's been one hell of a journey. So when I was in school, I guess math always kind of came naturally to me. So I ended up studying that when I was in university. Didn't really know what it is that I wanted to do. I was testing a bunch of different things. I was working at one of the banks at the time. And then I say, okay, I guess maybe I'll try getting my MBA, see where it goes from there. So I went and did my MBA, graduated with honors there, focused on marketing and finance. So I always kind of liked those 2 aspects of business. And I found myself working in investment banking. You know, it was this job that I kind of put in my head. And a lot of people told me that, well, it's really difficult to get in. And it was weird. I mean, I got a lot of people sort of discouraging me for even trying because of how difficult it was to kind of land a job like that. But that just kind of egged me on even more. So just put these horse blinders on, and that's the only thing that I wanted to do. I wouldn't even apply for other jobs. And, as luck would have it, I ended up being one of the first guys in the school that actually landed a job in investment banking. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I worked there for a few years. And then transitioned out of there and went into private equity. A big chunk of my focus was actually on green tech. So I've done a lot of different things in my career. So I was focusing on stuff like solar, wind, geothermal, all different types of power generation. And at the time, in the mid sort of 2000s, that was a really key category, especially in Canada. So that was my primary focus. And then I don't know why I kind of got this itch to start my own business and decided to start my own business in the live event space, of which I had absolutely no experience in.
Oh, wow. So persistence got you to investment banking. You feel like when you set your mind to something, you persist through it no matter what people tell you. That's probably a key factor to one of your key factors to success, right? And a kind of a forward-looking tech orientation, right? As to kind of what are these future technologies that are coming.
Yeah. And I can almost, if I really think back, I can sort of pinpoint the day where my frame of reference changed. And I think it was a day in grade 10 math class when my teacher comes to me, he says it to the whole class. He's like, look, if you want to succeed, in this class and in life, there's a couple things that you need to do. First of all, sit in the front of the class. I was the guy sitting in the back.
Mm.
Two, do every question in the book. Because if you do every question in the book, there's really nothing I can ask you that you won't know how to do. And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Put in some work. Right. So the very next day, I went to him and I said, I want to sit in the front of the class. I sat in the front of the class. And then for the whole year, I did every question in the book twice.
Wow.
I finished that year. I think I had a 98% in math, and I just carried that throughout. So, when it was, hey, I want to get into investment banking, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I want to get into investment banking. I found every book on investment banking. I read every interview question you could possibly ask in those interviews because they're challenging interviews, and that's how they do the weeding. I knew how to answer everything to the point where I was answering questions before they could even ask them.
That's amazing. It's interesting because I always ask my guests, I said, I always ask them, was there a game-changing moment in your life where it kind of changed the trajectory of the way you think and the way you show up? And that's one of them for you.
There was one. I mean, it was surprising, a couple of these things that happened in high school. And there was another time that I ran for student council president. I wasn't exactly an extrovert, so to speak. I was much more introverted. So I would go into all these classes and try to tell people what it is that I wanted to do and why I would, wanted to run, and nobody was really paying attention until one guy who was in my class. We weren't even really friends. He comes to me in the hallway and he's like, listen, man, he's like, I think you actually have good ideas, but your presentation skills are kind of shit. He goes, there's only one thing you need to remember. I said, well, what's that? He goes, nobody knows what's coming out of your mouth next but you. So don't get nervous when you talk. And again, it was just one of those things that kind of flicked the switch for me. And literally from that point on, I would go into these classrooms and just kill it on these presentations. And again, those are sort of things that you carry with you as you go. So I think, it's always important to kind of look back at the things that helped shape your life and try to pick out the things that help make you you and leverage those strengths. Because I think a lot of times people, how do I put it? Like, one of the questions I hate most in sort of interviews is, what's your biggest weakness? And I never ask that question because I don't care, right? I'm not looking to try to make everybody the same. I want people who can excel at the things that they're great at and then complement those skills with other people that are good at the things that you might not be good at, right? That way you can build a team of superstars as opposed to, a bunch of people that just have an average batting average.
One of the things you mentioned there that guy, that friend told you about, that nobody knows what's coming out of mouth other than you, is the fact that we talk ourselves out of opportunities that are right in front of us so many times because we have our fears of what people are going to think about us, or think about our ideas, if they're going to perceive us in a certain way, and we shoot ourselves in the foot so many times when it's so simple, right? I mean,
we do, and this may sound a bit off-putting, but nobody cares, right? Like we put all of this sort of fear into what other people might think about us, but I'm telling you, nobody cares because they're all worried about their own stuff.
Right.
And if they do have time to worry about you, it's really not in any meaningful capacity, and it won't make a lick of difference one way or the other.
I'll tell my clients sometimes, I go, look, don't think that you're so important, because you put so much emphasis on it. You think
you're important to you.
Correct. To you.
And you should be.
You're important. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's
to
right.
you, to your family, right? Those are the people that you should really care about. And, if you're worried about taking a swing, I've used this analogy before. Everybody thinks of Babe Ruth as sort of this home run king, right? Well, Babe Ruth had the record for most strikeouts in Major League Baseball until it was broken by Mickey Mantle.
Right. Another home run leader. Exactly.
So
you got to swing hard.
Every time. And if you miss, it's okay. But if you stop swinging, you're never going to hit a home run. Correct.
And we place a lot of emphasis on everything that we do wrong on the strikeouts versus, when we do succeed.
Focus on why you hit a home run. And I guarantee you'll start hitting more home runs. Otherwise, if you bog yourself down with why you missed it, that's all you're ever going to keep thinking about, and you'll keep missing it.
So you go on from interviewing for investment banking, and then you're in the green tech, and then you went into the live performance space. I mean,
The
what?
live event space. Yeah, that was the Gentleman's Expo. So I
Okay.
created a trade show when I barely even attended a trade show. Figured, hey, you know what? That seems like a good idea. I'll try something that I've never done before. And again, everyone in the industry thought that I was a lunatic, especially in the category that we were trying to do, because nobody had ever successfully done, at least, in our sort of environment, nobody had ever created a men's focused trade show successfully. And, when I was taking a look at the space, I thought that there was a lot of opportunity because, there were a lot of new events that were coming. Experiential was really growing as a marketing category. Brands were looking for areas to physically engage with potential consumers. And there wasn't really anything like this, yet there were a number of brands that would have wanted to participate in something like this if somebody had built it. So since nobody was building it, I figured, okay, maybe I'll try to build it. And we did. We grew it significantly year over year, and to the point where, a larger operator came in and bought us out.
Interesting. And what were you guys focusing on there? Anything and everything?
Easiest way to describe it would be if you took GQ magazine and you brought it to life. So you would have, Diageo there. You would have Anheuser-Busch there. You would have Campari. You would have like all the big alcohol companies. Then you would have a whole bunch of the fashion houses that would come in and set up educational experiences so that they could teach guys how to dress better.
Wow.
We would bring in cigar rollers that would teach you how to actually make a cigar and what goes into making a cigar. We would have athletes that would come in and, not only just sort of do the meet and greets and sign autographs, but they would try to teach you how to train like an athlete, right? They would go on a cooking stage and show you what they eat and how they prepare the food that they eat, and then what their training regime is. So if you want to be an athlete, this is the sort of rigor that you have to go through to become it, right? To really show you the work behind it. Wow. And it was, we tried to pair sort of entertainment and education,
right,
in a way that, men would find interesting and compelling to come. But one of the things that we really wanted to focus on as well is creating an inclusive environment for anybody to come. So whether you're a man or woman, you would, be able to come here and enjoy yourself and have a good time. And I think we were really successful in doing that. And then I exited that business and said, okay, well, what do I want to do now? I guess tobacco sounds fun. So I found myself working at Philip Morris.
Fantastic. And so, the tobacco industry over the last couple of decades has been transforming quite a bit, right? It's been demonized because of, nicotine and the impact that it has on people's health and so forth, and rightfully so. Mm-hmm. And at Philip Morris, you were also looking into more creative, more innovative products, right? In terms of the tell me more about that.
So one of the categories that they were looking to develop was this category called reduced risk products. So basically an ability to still deliver nicotine, but do it in a way that isn't as harmful as smoking cigarettes. And I thought that was an interesting pivot, because they were trying to put, the well-being of their clientele more at the forefront. So they were really looking at transforming the business as a whole, while not completely forsaking their consumer base, which again is a really interesting and challenging thing to do. Now, one of the big sort of issues, especially in Canada, is that the regulations on tobacco and marketing tobacco are so restrictive that you can't really tell anybody about it. So you have this great new product, you want to put it in front of smokers, but you can't tell them what it is and what it does and why they should even think about it. So how do you sell a product you can't talk about? And one of the reasons that they brought me on is because I was able to sort of see things a bit differently and try to find ways in which you could do things that most people couldn't sort of comprehend. And I think we were reasonably successful in sort of establishing a commercialization and route to market for this product and really putting it in front of smokers. Now, one thing that I noticed when I was there is that, the vast majority of smokers have tried other products. But the one thing most smokers absolutely hate is the fact that they're still addicted to this sort of ritual.
Sure.
Now, none of the products that the big tobacco companies are putting out really help solve that particular pain point. It's this sort of crutch that's in the industry that I don't really like, where they're overly reliant on developing and feeding an addiction in order to sell their product.
Correct.
And, when I kind of take a look at that, I say, well, there isn't any other product that is reliant on addiction to continue to sell it. Why can't we just do that? Right? The analogy I usually use is if you take the tobacco industry and you overlay it over the alcohol industry, all the consumers would be alcoholics.
Right.
Right. But alcohol does just fine without all of its consumers being alcoholics. Like, I like a beer, I like a bourbon, scotch. I'm not an alcoholic, but I can enjoy it when I want it.
Socially, right.
It's fine. But why can't we do the same thing with smoking? Why can't we give people something to smoke that isn't addictive, that doesn't trigger an addiction response, that still keeps them satisfied? And that way we can give the freedom to choose back to them, no different than any other CPG product. And that way I think you can take a lot of the stigma away from it, because it's not an addictive process anymore. Now you can decide to have a smoke if you want to have a smoke, no different than you can decide to have a drink if you want to have a drink. And I think that we can help solve that addiction problem in the tobacco industry, which is extraordinarily large. It's a huge problem. And the thing is, for a lot of people, they don't think, there's anybody that still smokes. But I'll tell you, there's almost 1.5 billion people who smoke worldwide. The industry is almost $1 trillion a year. And if you compare it to, say, bottled water is $250 billion a year. So tobacco's 4 times the size of bottled water globally.
Jeez.
It's big.
Unbelievable. And that's that, you think that there has been, just you look around and you think, at least I perceive, there's been a reduction of probably 80-90% of people that used to smoke that aren't smoking anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still huge.
It's
Globally, it's enormous.
Enormous. I call it the Mount Everest of markets.
That's right. So there's been obviously a big trend in the eating space where, there have been substitutes for meat, for example, right? Meat has been deemed as a Beyond Meat, and now you're eating, veggies, and, the Beyond Burgers are amazing and they taste like a burger and they satisfy like a burger, but you're actually, eating vegetables. And now you guys at TAAT are developing something kind of similar in the Beyond a Cigarette, where it doesn't include nicotine, but it still satisfies the, kind of like the cultural, norms of it, right?
Exactly, right. So our product, TAAT, it doesn't have tobacco and it doesn't have nicotine. Okay. So what we instead have, the biomass we use is predominantly made out of hemp. But what we've been able to figure out is how to make hemp taste more like tobacco or a cigarette, which is a key piece. If you want to actually try to switch that consumer base, you need to give them something that tastes like a cigarette.
Right.
Because there are hemp cigarettes that exist, but it tastes like you're smoking a joint.
Right.
Right. Our product tastes like you're smoking a Marlboro or a Camel or a Newport.
Right.
Right. It'll taste like a flavor profile that the consumers are otherwise familiar with, which is important if you're going to give them something to substitute. It's no different than what Beyond Meat did. Right. Veggie burgers existed before Beyond Meat showed up. They were in the frozen food section and they tasted like sawdust.
Yeah. Very true.
Right.
Very true.
Beyond Meat comes along and makes something that looks like meat, tastes like meat, sizzles like meat. Hell, they even figured out how to make it bleed like meat.
Yeah.
And they put it in the meat aisle. Now, all of a sudden, it's something that you'll actually consider if you're a meat eater, because that's really their primary target. They're not looking for necessarily vegetarians, because the vegetarian would likely look for something that doesn't taste like meat.
Right.
The person who otherwise eats meat is looking for something that would otherwise taste like meat in a place where they would otherwise buy meat.
Very true.
So we wanted to try to follow a similar model insofar as we give you something, at least for smokers, we give you something that tastes like a cigarette, that looks like a cigarette, that works like a cigarette. It'll satisfy you like a cigarette, but it's non-addictive. It doesn't have tobacco and it doesn't have nicotine. So as a smoker, would you not give that a shot?
Oh, absolutely. Because, the thing, at least from my point of view, that the issue I take in with tobacco company is that morally I wouldn't be able to stand behind it, because again, like I know that they're depending on nicotine to make sure that they keep their market. and you're hurting people's health. In this case, you're not addicting them. You're not getting them addicted at all. You're not impacting their health, but you're giving them, the need, and it slowly kind of allows them to kick that addiction.
Yeah. And again, like for us, I think it's about providing the consumer with that freedom to choose back and giving them that freedom to choose back. Because when you're physiologically dependent on a highly addictive drug, freedom to choose is really not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
I can't make choices for people. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't smoke, don't start. Like, I don't want people who don't smoke cigarettes to start smoking TAAT. If you do smoke, you should probably quit. That's easily your best choice. But if you don't want to quit, then try TAAT. And I think, when we kind of look at the market with that lens, we're really here trying to help solve a problem as opposed to create a new one.
Right.
There's 1.5 billion people who smoke. I don't need to create new smokers. I can have a big enough market of people that I can transition away from continuing to smoke tobacco cigarettes and giving them something else that I think is a fundamentally better choice.
Yeah, and that's fantastic because there's a social responsibility aspect to it that's front and center.
Mm-hmm.
You're not having people starting to smoke. You're just helping people who already smoke to then transition and give them the choice, like you said. Because when you're addicted, the same thing with alcohol, right? You don't have a choice. It's just a physical addiction that you can't really get over, without some help. So that's pretty interesting what you're doing there. And so how far along are you guys right now? You're based in Canada. Are you distributing in Canada as well as in the US, or where are you guys now with that?
So the publicly traded company is in Canada. Our operations are in the US currently. So we have manufacturing in Las Vegas. So that's where we make the product. We initially started commercialization in Ohio. We've since expanded out into Georgia and Illinois. We're currently expanding into a number of other states as well. We also signed our first distribution deal for across the pond. So we've got a large distributor in the UK and Ireland that we're going to start fulfillment on shortly. And we're also looking at a number of other markets throughout Europe and Central and South America as well to start bringing the product to. Because I think once a lot of distributors and retailers and even potential consumers have seen the product, especially smokers, like, hey, I would absolutely love to try that. When can we get it? Where I live. So for us, we're trying to get the product and commercialize as quickly as possible. And I think, I started here practically 12 months ago. So 12 months ago, we were still an idea. We had, we were still in a prototype phase. We had, an idea for what this thing was going to be. And 12 months later, we've already got product in market. We're in well over 500 stores now across the US. We've got e-commerce going. We're looking at signing international distribution deals. We filed for patents on our product because nobody's been able to figure out how to actually make this come to fruition. So I think we've come a very, very long way in a short period of time. But again, if I go back to the analogy of this being the Mount Everest of markets, we're basically just getting to base camp now.
Right. But you're doing some interesting thing on the marketing side. I saw the Floyd Mayweather promo and during the Logan Paul fight, I remember seeing TAAT and I was like, what is that? It gets people thinking, what is that exactly?
Well, I think it's important to kind of look at things from an outside the box standpoint and try to find areas where you can stand out. That opportunity came to us, and I thought that it was a wonderful way for us to stand out quickly. I mean, just like you saw, like you see this thing, like, what is that? Well, once we sort of launched that particular initiative for the fight, our social media audience tripled overnight.
Wow.
A lot of the traffic coming in from all over the world. And that, again, helped spur curiosity, which then leads to demand, which then leads to production and fulfillment and, acquiring of the consumer. So I thought that overall it was a tremendous sort of sponsorship for us. And, going forward, those are, some of the things that we'll look to do again.
So you've had a very interesting career. Obviously, you play in spaces where people doubt that you'd be able to succeed, and you do succeed. What would you say are your kind of defining characteristics or the kind of defining values that you go by that have served you well in your life?
I think I have a pretty good ability of explaining complex things in a simple and easy to understand way. And I think that that's key, especially when you're in a leadership role. Because if you can explain it in a way that, let's say, a 7-year-old can understand, not that I would explain cigarettes to a 7-year-old, but if you can explain it in a way that anybody can understand, that means that you understand it extremely well.
Yeah.
I think having an ability to communicate that way is of paramount importance because it helps build confidence, trust, loyalty, and faith in the direction that you're going. And I think especially when you're starting something new, it's really important that you can build that momentum, because without it, I mean, there's lots of great ideas that never see the light of day. You have to be able to tell people about it in a way that gets them excited. And I think when you can do that, your chances of success increase significantly.
There's something happening out there in the world in the last 12 to 18 months during the pandemic, and they're coining it the Great Resignation, where people are really rethinking what they do for a living and what they really want for themselves. And many are becoming entrepreneurs. And to become an entrepreneur, as you know, it does take a lot of courage, because you're building something from scratch. We've been kind of tied with the golden handcuffs in a career that perhaps we kind of walked into by accident or by circumstance or whatever, and we kind of stayed at for so many years. And leaving that that comfort zone, so to speak, could be very exciting. It could also be very frightening,
Yeah, it's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. It really is like a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Leaving is like going up the mountain, and then once you start, it's like going down the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice could you give to people who are thinking about making a move to entrepreneurship? What type of approach, what kind of mindset has served you well in that space?
If there's one piece of advice I can give you, if that's something that you're seriously thinking about, read Think and Grow Rich twice.
Yeah. Yeah. Napoleon
I know you've
Hill.
probably heard this a ton of times. Like, it easily is still to this day, outside of some of the ways that he explains things sometimes. But again, it was written in the early 1920s or 19.
Right.
But the basic tenets of that book are the foundation for practically every guru that exists. Whether you're Gary Vaynerchuk, whether you're Tony Robbins, whether you're Tim Ferriss, doesn't matter. They basically just take one snippet of that book and then extrapolate it to sort of fit what it is that that is going to be their worldview. But if you read that book and you start feeling that emotion in your gut, it'll help give you the confidence you need to actually make that step. So if there's one piece of advice, read that book if you haven't already. And if you have, read it again.
And like you said, read it twice and continue reading, because I think reading is one of the most powerful ways to really just kind of expand your mind, give you that growth mindset, take in other ideas, other points of view. I have an accountability partner, a good friend of mine, where we challenge ourselves to read 52 books a year, so a book a week. And he actually passed it. I got just close to it, but he actually passed it. And it's unbelievable the perspective it gives you, right? And we don't just sit and read. I mean, we'll do Audible, right? And Audible, you can crank it up a little bit speed and so forth, so it's doable. But just constantly challenging yourself, right? Constantly pushing the boundary, and even questioning yourself and kind of where you got the way you think, and is that the right approach and so forth. I think having that growth mindset, it's an integral and critical part of success, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur or not.
A couple of things. Like, one, the world changes so fast, you don't know everything. So absolutely, you have to keep reading and keep, up to speed on everything that's happening within your industry. And two, don't be afraid to look into other industries that might not have anything to do with what it is that you do to try to leverage some best practices. Because there's other people that, like, most of the problems that you might face, especially in the beginning, are problems that have already been solved or that other people have faced. And, reading up about the early stages of any company will, I think, give you a lot of perspective and guidance in terms of some of the potential challenges you might find yourself in the beginning. And it's always hard when you start, but once you take that first step, it's like, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you're moving. Just don't
show up every day.
Yeah.
Setti, thank you so much for being on, my brother. CEO of TAAT Global Alternatives, doing some amazing things, really changing the game in the tobacco industry, and helping people, kick that nicotine addiction. So congratulations on the success that you guys are having and the future that you guys have coming up for you.
Thank you, Sergio.
If you loved what you heard in today's episode of Game Changers, please subscribe and rate us. The lessons and the stories in these podcasts are immensely valuable, so I invite you to share them with a friend who needs to hear it. You may end up being the game changer in their lives.